What's up? It's Renlo, and welcome to Terrifying True Reddit Stories. All these stories are true, and this video is perfect if you're trying to sleep, relax, need some background noise, or you just want to watch a good video. Please like and subscribe, it helps the channel greatly. And without further ado, let's get into some terrifying true Reddit stories. My girlfriend has a strange new hobby. And I'm getting close to sounding the relationship's alarms and ending things. We've been together for 7 years. For 3, she attended nursing school, while I lifted the financial burden to keep us going. Then she did the same for me while I furthered my education. We both work in the same hospital, though our shifts rarely overlap. We are financially stable and in a great place emotionally until the last few weeks. Why am I telling you our background? For 2 reasons. First, I'm trying to convey that we are normal, responsible adults. We have been through everything together, and a relationship like this isn't thrown away because of a weird hobby that developed over the last few weeks, right? The second is to explain that the nature of our jobs is one that requires a deep desensitization to blood, gore, and things that the general public perceives as gross. This is important. Prior to 4 weeks ago, our life entered the monotonous but common synchronized schedule of an adult couple. We functioned like clockwork, aligning work, family, friends, meals, sleep, and exercise without a thought. There wasn't much change in our day-to-day events, but we liked it that way. 4 weeks ago, I came home from my shift at the hospital and expected to be greeted by the aroma of dinner on the stove, music playing, and a loving girlfriend. I didn't find any of that. I passed the threshold and found myself smelling and hearing nothing. I called for her, but got no response. I walked to our back door that overlooks our backyard and found her kneeling on the grass, facing away from me. "Babe, everything okay?" I asked, grass crunching under my shoes, an oddly satisfying feeling that I always enjoyed. No response. "Babe?" I reached out and touched her shoulder gently. Her head was facing down, back arched, staring at something she held in her hands. She appeared to be lost in a trance, awoken only by my touch. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes that made me melt. However, my eyes went to what was in her hands instantly. Cradled in her 2 opened hand was a relatively large crow, stiff with death, eyes staring forward, void of life. Across its chest, beginning below its head, reaching its belly, was an open gash that exposed the bird's intestines through a puddle of blood that pooled beyond my girlfriend's hands and onto our grass. "What?" I began, but she began sobbing. She explained that she had seen the injured bird through the kitchen window. It flapped around endlessly on the yard, and when she went to inspect, she saw a trail of blood and innards. She asked to keep the body in the bathtub or our guest bathroom so she could inspect the bird's anatomy. That's normal physician curiosity, right? I didn't think so, but I didn't say anything. This was the first of 5 different dead animals that are currently laying in my bathtub. They all have the same opening down their belly, and they're all stiff with death. 4 days after the crow, I came home to find her on our driveway, holding a dead squirrel. The following week, she ran into our house, asking for help with a dead Yorkie puppy that she saw us get run over during her evening run. Days later, she walked into our house with a dead cat. And 4 nights ago, I came home to find her dragging the corpse of a large stray dog that I had seen sniffing around our trash cans. She looked deranged, unrecognizable even. Her face was blank, emotionless, as she dragged a 60-pound corpse through our sidewalk onto our driveway, leaving a trail of fresh blood behind her. Her hair was wild and messy, giving the image of a savage cave woman. I ran towards her, screaming 100 different questions, but she simply said, "Put it in the bathtub with the others." I figured she is going through some emotional breakdown that's manifesting in a strange way. This isn't unheard of in hospitals, sure. Maybe I was being naive, but I chalked it up to something that can be fixed with a therapist. However, last night, I woke up in the middle of the night. The streetlight crept through our windows, just enough to illuminate the image that has been haunting me every second of my day. My girlfriend, the girl that I have built a life around, the future mother of my children, kneeled over me as I slept on my back. The light illuminated her soulless stare, only a few inches from my face. She ran her finger below my jaw all the way down to my belly. Her fingernail slid slowly, feeling like ice on my skin. I was too frozen to move in that moment. She knelt over me for a few minutes and returned to sleep, rolling onto her side of the bed harshly. When I brought it up in the morning, she laughed and dismissed it as if it were the most ridiculous story she had ever heard. It was clearly a bad dream, she said. Maybe she's right. I'm not sure what to do. I'm afraid that if I wait another few nights, my life may be in danger. But even writing that out about my future wife makes me sick to my stomach. Everyone in town talks about the same man. Nobody has any photos of him, and nobody can agree on what he looks like. He introduced himself to me as the librarian. It's a small town, and in small town fashion, we only really have the essentials. The server at the tiny diner knows far too much about your personal life. The barman is acutely aware of your alcohol to mixer ratio. The florist has your anniversaries and birthdays committed to memory. And he's the librarian. To me. A mild-mannered man in his early 40s with a penchant for exactly which books you'll return with a smile and a glowing review, and those you'll dislike. I've always been a keen reader. My husband Jordan and I met in a bookshop, him tucked away working in a quiet corner whilst nursing a coffee, and I aimlessly searching for my next read. Naturally, we ended up at the library fairly often, especially since we had only moved here 2 months ago, and found the library to be charming in all its cozy smallness. I needed to return a book, so I mentioned it to him in passing, typical morning talk. I said something about heading down there, and must have brought Ellis up without thinking. Why would I have thought, after all? His response confused me. Who's Ellis? Whenever we've been there together, the librarian has always been an elderly woman, Laura or something. I'm pretty sure she said was her name. I told him that he must be confused, but he seemed convinced that I was. We put it down to there being 2 librarians and pushed it out of our minds, even if that explanation made no sense, given we had both talked to the librarian at the same time before. But he was already late for work, and I was barely awake, so that's what was easiest. When I made the short walk to return my book later that morning, a new librarian was typing away, half obscured behind the desk. I'd never felt betrayed by my eyesight until that point, and I stumbled over my words as I read the bright red name tag brandished on her flowery blouse. Laura. She noticed the bewilderment on my face and spoke tenderly. Are you okay, honey? You look like you've just seen a ghost. I'm sorry, but I thought Ellis was the librarian. Is he off today or something? I managed to form in reply. I've been the sole librarian for longer than you've been alive. If there were an Ellis here, I'd love to pass my knowledge on, but sadly, there isn't, she said, her tone equal parts jest-filled and concerned. I told her I must have made a mistake and went through the motions, rattled, until I had the chance to phone Jordan. I suppose I didn't put enough emphasis on the slowly creeping sense of dread I was feeling, because his tone, too, was more light-hearted than I had hoped for. People with healthy minds don't just conjure up entire beings. Was I losing it? But then Jordan met someone by the name of Ellis, too. One of our neighbors 2 houses to the left, whom we never had the chance to introduce ourselves to. Well, he'd taken the initiative and knocked on our door one evening when I was out grocery shopping and Jordan was home alone. From what I've learned, he said his name was Ellis, and armed with a homemade cake and a toothy grin that he was sorry we hadn't been formally introduced yet. Jordan assumed that he was the Ellis I'd met, but the description didn't line up. The person I'd met wasn't young, wasn't the same height, wasn't anything like the person Jordan met. Curious and always up for a good mystery, even if feeling a strange unease, we asked the neighbors we had made friends with about this nebulous Ellis person. We shouldn't have gone looking for answers because an ugly truth reared its head soon after. The second house to our left had been unoccupied since the owners died last year. It might have been pristine from the outside, with grass trimmed neatly and white picket fences showing nary a sign of being unmaintained, but the inside was devoid of life. We confirmed as much with anybody who might have known, and as soon as both Jordan and I allowed the other to know of Ellis's perceived existence, neither of us saw him again. It suddenly felt as if our lives were dragging some unknowable hitchhiker along. We would be certain that the other was around, that unmistakable sense of human presence, even when we were far apart. It was as if some concealed set of eyes had converged upon us, doing nothing more than watching, waiting. Our shared experience was enough to let us know there was more to this, but just as soon as we resolved to dig a little deeper, the whispers around town started. Other, more gossip-minded townsfolk had started to connect dots that seemed to be spread far enough apart from each other they might well have been stars in countless neighboring solar systems. Everyone in town had either spoken to or heard of an Ellis, but in such a tight-knit community, it became very clear that nobody actually knew anybody by that name. Not a distant inheritor of property, not an alcoholic recluse, nobody on the fringes of the town's tiny society, nobody with the ability to live with being ignored went by Ellis. Nobody had any evidence of their version of Ellis existing. No letters, no photos, no text messages, nothing. And yet, over the past few years, everybody had met Ellis, or at least been told about him. All who spoke of him ended up in the same situation as we had, never seeing him again, but having that distinct feeling of being watched. And everybody who laid their eyes upon him described him differently. An elderly man with a stick and ancient slacks, a middle-aged man who had no memorable features, a young man with a skateboard strapped to his back. He was everything, all at once, and now the entire town finally acknowledged his existence. Confoundedness gave way to a quiet blanket of fear that seemed to smother the town and our new home. How do you trust your friends and neighbors when you can't trust your own two eyes? It was in the midst of this fear that an idea began to float around in hushed conversations behind shuttered blinds. We needed to hold a census. It was the only real way to determine who belonged and who didn't. It was a small town with, after our recent arrival, a small population of only 172, which made what could have been a logistical nightmare somewhat straightforward. We were all to gather in front of the little old town hall on a Saturday morning, and one person would be designated to conduct a head count. After forming neat lines and choosing who would count, our instructions were repeated to us. We were to be provided a number, and each of us would repeat it aloud after our number was called. A lady whose name I couldn't recall was to be number 1, and the count would proceed to the back of her line before moving to the next line and counting back to the first person in that line in the snaking motion. My husband and I were given numbers 171 and 172. And when the count finally reached us, we were numbers 172 and 173. I work night security at an abandoned water park. Someone keeps turning the slides on. People always ask why an abandoned place would need security. Let me explain. If something burns down, the city pays for it. If someone gets hurt trespassing, lawsuits happen. If a kid falls off a broken ride, there's an investigation. And places like this, Half Moon Water Slide Park, are a magnet for dumb teenagers and TikTok explorers. So yeah, they hire guys like me. Low pay, long hours, and a flashlight that barely works. But at least it was boring. Until last Tuesday. The park's been shut down since 2009. Some kid went missing during a night event, and they never found him. Whole place went bankrupt a few months later. Nobody touched it after that. No buyers, no demolition. Just sat there, rotting in the dark. The slides are still up, giant twisting tubes of faded plastic that creak in the wind. The wave pool is a dry crater, and the main tower, the tall one with the 6-story drop slide, is chained shut. At least, it was. Tuesday night, I was doing my first round, 11:47 p.m. I always walk the same path. Entrance gate, locker rooms, food court, slides, tower. Everything was normal until I got to the slides. Then I heard it. Water, flowing, splashing, rushing. I froze, pulled out my flashlight. The lazy river was running, except there was no water in that thing. Not anymore. Just cracked cement and a few raccoon bones. And yet, I could hear it, rushing past me, echoing down the path. I walked over to the control hut. The power box was open. The main switch was on. That shouldn't be possible. The park's been cut off from the grid for years. There's no power. And still, the intercom crackled to life. A distorted voice whispered, "All riders, remain seated with your arms inside the raft." I turned the switch off. The sound stopped. I told myself it was a shorted wire, echoes. Maybe I was just tired. Until the next night. I arrived at 10:58, early. Thought I'd check the cameras before heading out. We only have 6 working ones, all black and white, all grainy as hell. They're more for show than anything else. Camera 2, pointed at the base of the main slide tower, was showing movement. A figure, walking in slow circles around the tower. I zoomed in. No detail, just a shape. Slender, lopsided, almost like it was leaning to one side. I watched for 5 minutes. It didn't leave, it didn't stop, just kept walking. When I finally got outside, it was gone, but the chain on the tower door was broken. Snapped like someone had cut it with bolt cutters. I didn't sleep that day. Wednesday night, I brought a bat. No cameras showed movement, so I walked the whole park twice. When I passed the tower, the door was open a crack. I didn't go in, but I heard something coming from inside. Not footsteps, not voices. Breathing. Deep, wet. Too loud to be human. I ran. Thursday, my boss texted. Notice anything weird on shift? Slide tower lights are on. Pretty sure the building doesn't even have lights. He attached a photo, taken from a highway dash cam apparently. The tower windows were glowing yellow, like floodlights were on inside. That night, I didn't do rounds. I stayed in the security shack, door locked, bat in hand. At 2:31 a.m., every monitor turned to static, except one. Camera 6. Entrance to the wave pool. It showed a boy, soaking wet, standing motionless at the pool's edge, staring straight into the lens. He didn't blink. He didn't move. And when I checked the pool 10 minutes later, there were wet footprints leading toward the tower. Friday, I quit. Told myself I didn't need the money that bad. Told my boss I saw someone break in and refused to risk my life. He didn't fight me on it. But then last night I got an email. No sender, just a video file, 30 seconds long. It was security footage from the night the park shut down. You can hear kids screaming, not in fun, in panic. Then the footage cuts to the main slide, just as something crawls out of it. It isn't clear, too much static, but it's too big, and it moves wrong. I tried to delete it, but the file keeps coming back. Every time I open my laptop now, the slides start playing. They tore the tower down this morning, some kind of incident. Police tape everywhere. I drove by on the way to my brother's. The foundation's gone, flattened, but the slide is still there. Just one tube, standing straight up like a straw in the dirt, and water is pouring out of it, constant, endless, no pipes, no tank, just falling from somewhere above, from nowhere at all.